restructured contract. What do we know about that right now? Could it be of the Jim Harbaugh variety, meaning, okay, coach, we believe in you. We want you to stay. We believe you're headed in the right direction in some areas, but in other areas, you need to change. You have not met the standards. Therefore, we're paying you too much money. We're going to restructure the contract. That's a nice way of putting we're slicing your salary. I don't know that that's going to happen. I would not be surprised if that is the case. If Nebraska is possibly taking a cue from Michigan, you can have the right guy in play or believe he's the right guy, but also say you're not meeting the standards. 4-8, 5-7. What has it been? It's been 5-7, 4-8. No, 4-8, 4-8, 5-7, 3-5, 3-7. It all adds up to a mess, is what it adds up to. Not even close to a standard for anybody in the Big Ten. Practically nobody would, even the likes of Illinois and Rutgers, eventually would fire a coach who's losing 65 to 70% of his games. That wouldn't even be tolerated. Lovie Smith had that kind of record. He got fired. Others would as well. So not just a Nebraska standard, that's just kind of a basic college football standard that he's not meeting, winning. I think it's 15-27 now. 15-27 is about 35% of your games. Winning 35% in the Big Ten, it's got to be atrocious compared to that, because obviously they're winning against the group of five in the FCS most of the time. So you can look at the improvement, the progress, the development of the program, the weight, the strength and conditioning program, all that, and say, okay, we're competing better on the field, but the results are substandard. Therefore, the restructured contract means you're not meeting standard. We're paying you too much money. We're going to pay you less money. So it could be a Jim Harbaugh type of restructured contract that we find out about soon. And also, again, possible coaching staff changes. It seems as though Greg's pretty confident those will be in the works. I would say the same thing. We saw it today with Dan Mullen in Florida. He still has a job. It will remain to be seen based on Florida's performance against Missouri and Florida State to close out the season if Dan Mullen will still have a job. But as of right now, he was forced to make changes. Had to fire the defensive coordinator and the offensive line coach at Florida. This could be much of the same here with Scott Frost. All right. Matthew says, great move by the university. Structure contract and coaching changes means that the win-loss record so far is not acceptable at Nebraska, but also not ignoring the clear progress made in competitiveness. Boomer believes that Frost will turn it around next year. If he doesn't, then he's gone. This program, meaning Trev Alberts, needs to have a clear thought process and standard as to what is acceptable next year. So really, now that they've restructured the contract and have announced that he will be back for 22, is it important what happens the final two games of the season? Sure, they want to see a competitive team against Wisconsin and Iowa, but it really doesn't matter. He's going to be back in 22. So what does 22 need to look like? There have been too many moral victories, too much talk about development and progress. That is all true, but as Alan states right there, if I'm running the show, I put a standard out there. And whether I communicate that to Scott Frost or not, probably not. I just know in my brain, this has to be, I have to see the progress turn into and transfer into results. And I would have a hardline number in my head that could be massaged based on circumstances, injuries, really close, excruciating losses. And I know that they've suffered those and you don't want to hear about and witness more of those. But Think about it, Nebraska fans. Did you see a team, let's say in 2016, that went 9-4, that was not anywhere close to a 9-4 football team in terms of other 9-4 teams that we see nationally ranked? No, they lost by 59 points to Ohio State. They had a soft, fluffy, easy schedule to start out. They racked up a bunch of smoke and mirror type wins, and they showed that they're not a 9-4 team. So I would evaluate the level of play as well, in addition to the record. But I would be right in that. I think that between Allen and Sid Irish, I think that is very reasonable. Got to go 7-5, and that's 7-5. Let's look at the schedule. So this is, for me, what this 7-5 needs to look like. Okay, look at the out-of-conference games. Oklahoma at home, Georgia Southern, North Dakota. Okay, you win 2 or 3. The obvious loss is to Oklahoma, but you play well. Okay, 2-1 outside the conference. Okay, 5-4 in the Big Ten. Got to play everyone in the West. That includes some really tough teams, but not elite, great power teams. It's not Alabama. It's not Ohio State. It's Wisconsin. It's Minnesota. It's Purdue. It's those teams that they need to start beating. Okay, they've got everyone in division, of course, and then out of division, they've got Rutgers on the road, Indiana, Michigan on the road. That's a pretty light non-division schedule right there. They don't have to play Ohio State. They don't have to play Michigan State. They don't play Penn State. They do play Michigan on the road, but Rutgers and Indiana. So it's not a difficult, brutal Big Ten schedule as much as it is and has been this year. So that 7-5 for me would also include, it would be nice to beat somebody good. Beat Wisconsin, beat Oklahoma, beat Iowa, beat somebody, beat Michigan. Win one of those games. At least one really good win. And also, now this doesn't seem possible because they haven't been blown out this season, but look back the last few years. Don't revert to getting blown out in some of these games. Not that they can't get blown out in any game the entire season. I wouldn't make that the standard, but they can't routinely or multiple times get blown out. Like for me, if they go 7-5 and they get the 7 wins against Northwestern, North Dakota, Georgia Southern, Rutgers, Indiana, Purdue, and Illinois, if those are the 7 wins and they lose like chalk to Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Oklahoma, and they get blown out like 3 times, then maybe 7-5 or 6-6 isn't good enough for me. Maybe it's like, okay, yeah, you went 6-6. We went to a bowl game, but we got killed in the bowl game. We got killed by a number of teams that we were playing with and playing competitively against before. So the record is important for me, but it's also about being competitive against top-notch competition and beat somebody. Beat somebody. Finally beat a Wisconsin. Beat an Iowa. Beat a Michigan. Beat an Oklahoma. Somebody. Yes, Scott Frost has by far a worse record than Mike Riley. I believe Mike Riley was 19-19, and Scott Frost, I think, is 15-27. Daniel says, excuses. They can't beat the crappy teams either. Nebraska is horrible. Okay, they're not horrible. Daniel, if you watch college football, you see horrible teams every week. Rutgers started off not horrible, but now they're reverting to typical Rutgers. They're horrible. Kansas is horrible. There's a few teams in the ACC. They're pretty bad. Vanderbilt's obviously horrible. Yeah, their record's horrible. The record is horrible. They're going to go 4-8 at best. That's horrible. Preston, exactly. The schedule next season is easier. And we could easily be 7-5 or better this year. I just hope we get at least one really good quality win next year. They don't play Ohio State, Oklahoma, Michigan, somebody like that. One. Actually, they've got 5 games like that. I would put Oklahoma, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa in a certain class. I'm not saying they're all the same, but they're in a certain class. Minnesota's not really there, but they would be in the next in line. Minnesota, Purdue. Win one game like that. Scott Frost, when we were looking at it a couple of weeks ago, I made the comment to Greg. I said, when are they going to beat somebody good? And I went through Scott Frost's tenure at Nebraska. The best team that Nebraska's beaten, the only team that they've beaten in the Big Ten that's over 500, one team in 4 years. The first year, they beat Minnesota. And I'll even put a disclaimer, a qualifier on that win against Minnesota, because Minnesota started the season 2-6. And that's when Nebraska caught them at 2-6. That Minnesota team won its last 5 games, beat teams like Wisconsin. They basically fired their defensive coordinator, Rob Smith. They got so much better. They were a different team the last month of the season. They beat Northwestern. They beat Wisconsin. They won a bowl game against Georgia Tech. They were 7-6. So that was the team Nebraska beat that had a winning record in the Big Ten. The only one. And even that Minnesota team was 3-6 in the Big Ten. Nebraska has not beaten a good team in forever. Let's see here. When's the last time Nebraska beat a ranked team? I think they've lost like 16 consecutive games against ranked teams. So this year's wins, Northwestern, Fordham, Buffalo. So as much as they are playing so much better and playing close, those are the 3 wins this year. Fordham, Buffalo, and Northwestern. Northwestern's the worst team in the Big Ten. In 2020, they beat a Penn State team that's the most talented team they've beaten in a long time. But of course, we know what happened to Penn State last year. They went 4-5. So Nebraska beat Penn State. So how do you rate that win? It's kind of difficult against a 4-5 team. They beat Purdue, who was 2-4. They beat Rutgers, 3-6. Year before, 2019, they beat South Alabama, 2-10. They beat Northern Illinois, 5-7. They beat Illinois, 6-7. They beat Northwestern, 3-9. They beat Maryland, 3-9. They lost to a 4-8 Purdue team in 2019. They lost to a 5-7 Colorado team, 5-7 in the Pac-12. Mel Tucker. 2018, who they beat? That Minnesota win I just talked about. Again, nice win against a team that eventually was good, but they got a different Minnesota team. So that was the year Scott Frost took over, of course, 0-6. Then they played much better down the stretch. They beat Bethune-Cookman, Minnesota, Illinois, 4-8, Michigan State, 7-6. So either the Michigan State or the Minnesota teams, those were the 2 best teams, 7-6. So those are Scott Frost's best wins. 2 7-6 teams in the Big Ten, Michigan State, Minnesota. By far, those are the best wins. Mike Riley beat a 7-6 Purdue team. That was the Hail Mary, right? The 25-24 game. That was one of the Hail Mary plays. That's by far his best win his last season. The 2016 team, the team we talked about, the smoke and mirror 7-0 team that then got trounced down the stretch. They beat a 7-6 Northwestern team. They beat a Minnesota team that went 9-4 in 2016. That Minnesota team won the Holiday Bowl. So that's the last team they beat that had a good record. 2016. They beat Minnesota 9-4. That's the last team they beat that was, I don't think they finished fringe ranked that year. The last time they beat a really good team. Oh, the Michigan State game, 2015. Yeah, the big upset against Michigan State, the team that went to the playoffs. Yeah. Good discussion here. Appreciate everybody being here. And we wanted to get here to jump online and talk about the restructured contract as much as we can at this point. It has yet to be announced exactly what that means, what it looks like. And we are anticipating staff changes. Probably special teams, offensive side of the ball. Yeah. All right. Don't know if we have any more to discuss right now. I'm not seeing too much in the live chat. As we look at Wisconsin and Iowa, certainly Iowa is scuffling. Do they have a great defense? They do. They still have a great defense. Really, nobody's doing much against them offensively, but they're the worst offense in the Big Ten. They just are. I don't care what the yardage totals say or the points. They're the worst offense in the Big Ten. They either legitimately replaced Spencer Petras at quarterback because of injury, or they made an excuse for him, and Alex Padilla took over against Northwestern. Think about what Nebraska did against Northwestern. Iowa hung on 17-12. They had to have an interception in the end zone in that game, 17-12 against Northwestern. Nebraska can beat Iowa. Iowa's toss-up game, but they can win that game. I believe is that game at home. I believe that game's at Nebraska. So that did not look like a winnable game a month ago, but Nebraska actually, I'm going to say, should beat Iowa. They're playing better football than Iowa is, the Iowa team we've seen over the last 3 to 4 games. Wisconsin, they've kicked it into gear. Wisconsin has kicked it into gear. And Wisconsin kicked Iowa's teeth in. That game was not close. They beat them up. They just mauled them defensively. They are showing finally at the end of the season here, they're a different team. They're the team in the division. They beat Purdue by 3 scores, and everybody else is showing themselves vulnerable. Wisconsin has pulled it together. They beat Iowa by 20. They beat Purdue by 17. They're good. Are they a great team? No. They're still not prolific passing the ball. They won't be. That's not who they are. But they're the best team in the West. They just are. So they are not. I do not see them losing to Nebraska with a Big Ten Western Division championship on the line. Iowa, though, again, that could be the win. Scott Frost, that would be the best win he would have in his what will be 44-game career at that point.